Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Let me start by saying I hope all is well with each and every one of you and that you are safe. I know these are difficult times for everyone. Just about all of us live in states where we are staying at home. If you listen to the news, and there is no escaping that, it is heart-wrenching, depressing, and terrifying. We all hope and pray that very soon, as a result of staying home and social distancing, we will flatten the curve and begin to have a reason to believe we are slowing the advance of this horrible virus. Until then, we must all do our parts. During times of crisis, we need diversions, something that can take our minds off of the terrible events surrounding us. Sports is usually one of those diversions, but even that has been taken away from us. The question for all sports fans, whether it be NBA, NHL, baseball, or NFL and college football, is when will we get back to normal? At this point in April, no one really knows. When it comes to college football, coming season is surrounded by uncertainty. Will it start late? Will it be canceled? Will it be moving to spring? Will there even be fans in the stadium? So many questions and so very few answers as of this moment. My guest today says all we can do is speculate right now. Joining me on this week's Game Day segment is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Here on the Michigan Man, in partnership with our friends at SB Nation's Maize and Brew. So stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment this week is Michigan football beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. It's wonderful to hear from you, Aaron.
Mike, it's good to be back. Happy spring, and hopefully you and all your listeners are happy and healthy.
Well, we hope and pray the same. As we all know, we're in the midst of this battle with the coronavirus, and it just seems like there's bad news swirling around us all day if you pay attention to the news. We need some diversions, even small ones, and to take our minds off of that. And usually sports is a great diversion, but not having any sports now for weeks still seems very unreal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely different. Typically right now we'd be going through, Michigan would be practicing. They'd probably be about midway through, I'd say. We would have spoken to Coach Harbaugh by this point, several players. Kind of gotten a feel of what this team could look like in the fall, and just right now there's nothing. They haven't started spring practice. They didn't even get one off the ground. The players are not in Ann Arbor at this point. Many of them have gone home, and we're all kind of waiting to see what's next, because I don't think anyone really knows at this point.
Well, as you and I mentioned before we started taping, getting content, stories, very difficult right now because coaching staff scattered, players scattered, nothing happening. And for football fans, I think they're beginning to wonder if the season will start on time the way things are going. And I think at this point, that is a very real question, isn't it, Aaron?
It is, and it's something that's starting to come up nationally. And I know some of the folks from, whether it's coaches and athletic directors and presidents, I think they're openly wondering the same thing. And it sounds like they're, getting to kind of develop some contingency plans for maybe a shortened season, maybe moving the season back. It seems like I've seen every possibility kind of thrown out there at this point. But it's all at this point kind of speculation. We don't really know. I do think if things can start to get back to normal come June and July, I do think they can still pull off a 12-game season. But again, there's just so many. This is really a fluid situation. It's been that way now for, I'd say, a month. It's going to, I think, remain that way for at least another couple of months. It's tough to say. At this point, the Big Ten, I think, has suspended all organized team activity through May 4th. I would suspect that's extended here. I think the SEC, I think just last week, extended it to the end of May. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Big Ten follows suit. And then they've got a decision to make. I'd say the beginning of May 1st, it will probably determine whether or not, these schools can hold their summer camps, whether they can, the players will be able to reconvene and work out. And if not, none of that happens, then I think you're going to see some sort of change of the season, whether it's shortened, whether it's delayed. But absolutely, it's a real possibility that this season may not even happen if this continues to drag on the way it has been.
You're right. Well, last week I heard Ward Manuel on John Jansen's In the Trenches podcast, and he said he's optimistic. He has to stay optimistic, but he has all of the same questions we do. Will the season start on time? If it does, will we play in an empty stadium? Will lots of fans just decide it's too soon to be in a crowd? There are so many issues involved in that decision, aren't there, Aaron?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from that conversation from when I heard it was, the idea of not playing in the stadium or not playing in front of fans in the stadium. Whether that's, the NCAA or the Big Ten deciding not to let people in the doors or like you said, maybe fans decide they just don't want to go. They don't want to be a big crowd and they don't want the chance of, picking something up. And if that ends up happening, again, that's a big if at this point. There's a lot that goes into that. It's going to be a massive blow to Michigan's, economic situation, the athletic department's budget. I was crunching the numbers last week, and in 2019, Michigan's athletic department generated almost $200 million in revenue. Almost $50 million of that came from football season ticket sales, or football ticket sales last year. Another $35 million came from the TV distribution rights and everything else. So if you don't sell tickets and don't let people in the door, that right away wipes away almost 25% of their annual budget. So it would have huge ramifications for Michigan's athletic department, staffing, and the like. Keep in mind, Michigan generates a lot of money, but they also spend a lot every year too on facilities and just paying their coaches and all the staff members and everything. So, this hard decision would have to be made. And Ward mentioned that the budget issue, and that's something they're going to have to tackle this summer, because that's when you typically, they come to they plan for the next year, and then they come out with a projection. So yeah, it's a possibility. It would be a different one, that's for sure. Whether it's feasible or not, I don't know. I'm more of the opinion that if they come to that conclusion of not playing in front of the stand and not playing in front of fans, then should they really be playing at all? That's the thing, because these players do come in close contact with one another on a regular basis. They're sweating over one another. So if there's concern over the fans getting sick or catching something, I'd say there should be concern over the players too.
Absolutely. And I think one of the concerns is that football is the cash cow for the entire athletic department, and all of these non-revenue sports are watching very closely too, because everything is impacted if there are no people in the stands and no revenue for football.
100%. The football pays for a lot of these other sports, so that gives them the ability and the resources to have these bigger budgets. A school like Michigan is fortunate because the athletic department is self-sustaining. They make more money than they spend. And that's not the case at most schools across the country. Smaller schools, for example, in the MAC, Eastern Michigan or Central Michigan, they rely on football. Obviously, generates a lot of their revenue, but they're subsidized by universities. So football, say they don't play football this season, that those athletic departments are going to take massive hits. They're not going to, in a way, they may not be able to fund themselves for the year. So football is a huge deal. Everyone knows that. It's what generates all the money from TV and ticket sales and everything. So if football isn't played or it's modified this fall, it has a domino effect. The TV contracts with ESPN and ABC and the like. Those stations, those networks take hits as well. They have employees. You're starting to see more people laid off, independent contractors, freelance journalists. It has a real domino effect, and it would impact the industry greatly.
Right. And I've had listeners tell me, well, it would be bad if there were no fans in the stands, but you have the TV revenue. And I point out to them, you know what? The advertising revenue is going to be disappearing for the ESPNs, the Fox Sports. So that is also impacted by this.
Yeah, 100%. I was reading this article the other day about NBC, just the network NBC, and they said that they have fewer commercials. They're running fewer commercials at this point. And this is just over all their programming, not just sports. And it's because advertisers, they don't have the money to spend, or they choose not to spend the money because they need to short things up for the books. Because some companies are laying people off. They can't afford to, keep going in some regards. So yeah, it would have a massive effect on everything.
Well, one of the things Ward and all athletic directors are concerned about is season ticket sales. Michigan has extended the deadline to mid-May, and Ward said he's even open to moving it farther out. He even has a payment program in place, which, leads me to believe, he didn't say it, but it leads me to believe many people are rethinking whether they want to come back this soon, Aaron.
100%, yeah, and then that's another example of deciding do you want to sit, bring yourself to the stadium, be next to the person. Because keep in mind, for those listening that haven't been to Michigan Stadium, I mean, it's cramped in there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's one of the most uncomfortable, stadiums to watch a game in. It's huge, it's a great environment and everything else, but you're almost on the person next to you. So it's, if they, to fill that place again this fall would be impressive. But then you've got to convince your fan base to pay for tickets in which some of these families are hurting. Some people are being laid off. Some people are losing their jobs, and then to risk going there and potentially catching something that may still be out there this fall. So it's a decision the fan base is going to have to make. It certainly doesn't help that the schedule this year, the home schedule isn't as, I guess, enticing as it was last year. I mean, Michigan State, Ohio State are both on the road this year. Washington, their marquee non-conference game against Washington is on the road. So, I mean, with all those factors in play, I guess it doesn't surprise me that they're struggling to sell season tickets. But the same token, too, the Michigan fan base has always been there. I think that if things do clear up and things are fine, that they will come back, absolutely. But yeah, that just goes to show, the seriousness of the situation, and folks at home, they have to make a hard, serious decision about whether they want to renew. And keep in mind, to renew or sign up for season tickets, it's not just paying for the tickets. They ask for a seat license. You got to throw down another couple $100s too. So it's an expensive, expenditure. It's something people have to take seriously. And right now it's something you've really got to think about if you want to do it.
One of my listeners asked me last week, who will make the decision about when and if there will be a season? Will it be the NCAA, the conferences, the government, the CDC? And I don't think anyone really knows how that's going to work yet.
No, and it's an interesting question because, I think, from the sounds of things, the federal government, at least the president, wants these sports leagues to play or try to play. So then I think it comes down to the governing bodies. So in this case, it would be the NCAA. Obviously, the individual conferences will have a decision to make, and they can kind of go their own way. But then it creates the, kind of disparity question. Say the Big Ten decides not to play, or maybe not begin the season, but then the Pac-12 or some other conference decides to start playing. Like, how do you figure that out at the end of the year? Maybe, some conference teams have played all 12 games, others haven't. Then it impacts the non-conference schedule. So from a scheduling and logistics standpoint, and then determining, the bowl game situation, the college football playoff, to me, you would think the NCAA would have to make an overall decision. They did decide to cancel the men's basketball tournaments, but that was kind of only after the individual conferences started canceling their individual league tournaments. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to follow who makes the decision first. But I do think at some point the NCAA will have to step in and make a call either way, whether it's, then publicly declaring that we're going to at least continue on for now. But again, it's going to be interesting because, obviously as we're seeing this whole coronavirus situation play out, some regions of the country are more affected than others. So some schools might be fine and they might be able to practice and play games. Others may not, and it stretches across the Big Ten even. Michigan has been hit hard by the virus. New Jersey's been hit hard by the virus, while other states, Iowa, Nebraska, haven't. So it's going to be an interesting situation here in the next couple of months how this is handled and who makes the decision.
Here with us on our Game Day segment this week is Michigan football beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. And, Aaron, if you're an optimist, a lot of people are, you're thinking as bad as it is right now, it's got to be better by August for practice to get started. So let's say this is the decision. I've read speculation a lot of coaches would like a 10-day practice period even before camp starts, so that would probably mean July. Ryan Day was talking about that yesterday. He thinks it would be fair, sort of what the NFL does, and that was primarily because there was no spring practice. Do you think those are the kind of things the NCAA is going to take into consideration?
Yeah, I do think they have to make some type of call in that regard because some schools were able to start spring practice. I think Ohio State got one or two under their belt, and others just didn't. Like Michigan, they're about to start right when the whole the epidemic kind of hit here in the United States. So I do think that some of these schools are going to have to get an opportunity to get their feet wet, so to speak, because missing the entire spring is huge. I mean it was an opportunity for some of these younger guys to get work, the coaches to kind of evaluate and they essentially lost all that. So, we're going to be going into the summer typically where, guys are able to work out on their own, guys who get together and practice. That's not happening right now. So I do think there needs to be some sort of, conditioning period for these schools to kind of get going, because, if and when this lets up, like you said, like it should have happened this summer. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3 months or some of these schools have been, that these players haven't done anything. So I think they do need to have some type of, lift-off period. 10 days, would be fine with me. But you're right. I think the NCAA, is going to have to make a cross-the-board decision on that one, just to kind of jumpstart things.
Well, another scenario that's being tossed about, and I tend to give this one credence, is having an abbreviated season, meaning dropping the non-conference games, playing only a Big Ten or conference schedule. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, if that's a way to maybe start the season a little bit later than scheduled, I think that'd be fine. It does buy a couple of weeks for most of these Big Ten teams because, Michigan, I think Michigan plays all 3 of their non-conference games at the beginning of the season. Now, there are some schools that will, they do start the Big Ten schedule, second, third game in. So if that would be, that would be a little bit earlier, but I think it would buy more time. And I think that's part of the idea behind it. And it alleviates some of the travel because some of these non-conference games, take Michigan, for example, they're scheduled to open against Washington in Seattle. It's a cross-country trip. We know Washington, the state of Washington's been hit pretty hard by the coronavirus. So it's not a bad idea. It's something to try and get, just to play a season that's fine. Will happen. I don't know, but it would. I think it would be a good move. But and at the same token, you got to consider the economic ramifications from something like this. A lot of these smaller schools, the group of 5 schools, the FCS schools, depend on these games for budgetary reasons. They make a lot of money off these games. So if you were to cancel those games, you're gonna crush some of those smaller schools and their budgets. And so it's, there's the decision to make both sides, but I would not be opposed to that move.
Well, the most interesting idea I've heard talked about in recent days, and I think over the weekend, Stuart Mandel in The Athletic wrote about this, is that if a decision has to be made by midsummer, maybe it would be prudent to cancel the fall season and move it to the spring of 2021. Now, that's crazy. Some people would say that's pretty radical. It is an idea that's gaining traction, by the way.
Yeah, it's certainly doable. They can kind of schedule out ahead of time, maybe, winter workout session, winter practices you can kind of do indoors. It would certainly, change, I think, the way the game is played a little bit just because you're not getting so much. They would have, by that point, they would have gone, almost, more than a year of not playing a game. So it would be interesting in that regard. I do think it would impact, seasons going forward because then if you play a season in the spring, and then you turn around, maybe take the summer off, and then they expect to start the season so that would be the 2022 season in the fall. That would be, 2 seasons kind of condensed into, 6 months, 10 months. So it would certainly be practical and doable. But I'd be curious to hear, maybe student athletes' thoughts and players' thoughts. Now, one thing it would benefit is the seniors coming up, the guys with 1 year of eligibility remaining. They would be able to get their senior season in, and go out, having played another game or another season, and then going in the NFL draft. But then that's something you got to wait to the NFL season. The NFL draft, NFL, as far as we know, plans on going ahead. They're having their draft here this month. I would presume the NFL draft would take place next April too. So that would, I think, impact some of that, impact, the seniors' decisions, whether or not they're going to play. So there's a lot of ramifications on all these decisions. I'm not opposed. I guess I shouldn't say I'm opposed to any of them. I think that would be interesting. It would be unique. It certainly wouldn't be something we've never seen before. I just don't know, what that would mean for the following season, how that would impact that.
Well, there are a number of ADs that are even talking about pay cuts for coaches, maybe no bonuses in the coming year, cutting program extras. I'm not sure what that means, but none of those things will be popular. They may be necessary if the revenue is way down. A lot of schools are going to be forced to make moves they really don't want to, aren't they, Aaron?
Yeah, and you're starting to see it. I think Matt Campbell at Iowa State said he was going to take a pay cut. I think some of his assistant coaches were going to take a pay cut. I think the Wyoming coach said he was going to do the same. And, like I said earlier, should football not be played this fall or maybe it's condensed or whatnot, it's really going to impact some of those smaller schools and their athletic budgets. They're going to come out of this, in the red and not being able to pay for things. And you're going to result in I think you're going to see maybe other sports cut. I think I saw Old Dominion had to cut the wrestling program last week because of fears of not being able to make their budget for this year. So you're going to see. While football may not go anywhere for some of these schools, it's going to have a trickle-down effect where some of these smaller programs, athletic programs, aren't going to be able to make it. They're not going to be able to pay for them. They're just going to cut. So I would not be surprised if other schools follow that model, especially some of the smaller ones. A school like Michigan, I don't think they necessarily need to take a pay cut. At least right now in the short term, if this continues to go on, maybe it's a possibility. But yeah, I think at this point, from an athletic department standpoint, it would definitely be wise to not pay out anything you necessarily need to. I'm curious to see if this trickles on longer, how this affects the coaching carousel next year, because you're starting some of these salaries, especially some of these football coaches, have ballooned. Not only the head coaches but the assistant coaches. You're seeing assistant coaches make now almost $2 million a year. So I'm curious to see if that bubble sort of has popped, or at least this will pop that, and what the future means for coaching and salaries itself in the collegiate game.
Well, unfortunately, speculating is really about all we can do right now. And while we do that, the coaching staffs are, believe it or not, busy with recruiting, doing it in a very different way, but still busy, aren't they, Aaron?
Yeah, so they've all been working from home, and it sounds like the bulk of their work is done. Obviously, they're still communicating with players and recruits, but it has to be either over the phone or electronically. So they're either doing FaceTime, they're talking on the phone. Zoom, the video conferencing model has become very popular here in the recent weeks. Everyone's talking about Zoom, or they're holding Zoom meetings, so it's kind of a virtual face-to-face with some of these guys. And right now, that's the only way they can keep in contact with these guys. The NCAA has put a recruiting ban out there. The Big Ten has a recruiting moratorium in place, I think, until the end of May or early June at this point. So coaches can't. They can't travel. They can't meet some of these recruits. They can't host these recruits on campus. So the only way to interact with them at this point is over the phone or via, electronically, computer. So that it's definitely changed the way recruiting is going on right now. They're giving some of these recruits virtual tours of campus. They're obviously talking to them, communicating with them electronically. So it's forced some of these recruits to commit without necessarily having visited campus, which I think is unique in itself, because Michigan, especially Michigan, they rely so heavily on in-person recruiting visits. They personalize these things for the players. Michigan's campus is pretty incredible. Ann Arbor's a really cool city. Obviously, they have the stadium to their benefit, and they can't use all that right now. Because the recruits can't come to campus. They can't go visit them. So it's changed the way recruiting is happening. I think it's a fascinating way. Michigan has landed several recruits in the last week or so. I think they're up to 7 for the 2021 recruiting class. But it certainly hasn't slowed things down. You're seeing more and more kids. Obviously, they're finalizing their top schools and they're making their decisions. So it certainly changed the parameters of how recruiting happens.
Yeah, and recruiting is really the only news that we've had to talk about in the last couple of weeks. And as you mentioned, Michigan has had a slew of commits. Right now, I think the class is rated in the top 15, but 6th in the Big Ten the last time I saw, which worries a lot of my listeners that follow recruiting on a daily basis. Is it too early, do you think, to be concerned with how it's going on the recruiting trail for Michigan?
Keep in mind these recruiting rankings take a couple of things into factor. One, the average kind of rating, star rating, number rating of these recruits, and then the number of players in the class. So, for instance, Michigan's got 7 committed at this point for the 2021 class. 6 of them are really only being rated because one of them is a kicker. So I'm presuming you're taking your rankings off 24/7's composite. So they're taking the combined arrivals and then 24/7s, and then they're kind of mashing them together. But no, the reason, one of the reasons is obviously they just don't have the volume isn't there yet. So like Ohio State, I think they have 15 commits at this point. Several of them are 5 stars. Wisconsin's got a huge number. Penn State does not, and they've fallen as well in the Big Ten. Rutgers, I think, is ahead of them currently in the Big Ten rankings. Again, they've got, I think, 10 or 11 kids committed. So right now, I think for Michigan, it's more of a volume thing. I think if they're to get closer to those double digits, they'd probably be in the top 5 of the Big Ten, and they would certainly probably be a top 10 at this point nationally. So I wouldn't, if you're a Michigan fan, I wouldn't be too worried just yet. There's still a long way to go in this cycle. They got a couple big guys they're eyeing at this point. If Donovan Edwards, the 4-star running back from West Bloomfield, ends up committing, I certainly think it would rocket Michigan not only the top 10, but probably close to the top 5. So no, nothing to worry about right now. It's more of I think, a numbers game than anything.
Well, as we've discussed, there are so many unknowns when it comes to Michigan and college football, just life in general, really. One thing we can probably say, though, Aaron, is that this pandemic will not only change all of our lives, how we go about our daily lives, but it is going to change the landscape of college sports for some time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's going to change the way we approach life, the way we deal with one another individually, the way we watch sports. The longer this goes on, I think the more these sports leagues, not only college football, but the NFL, the NBA, kind of reassess how the game is played. I mean, because keep in mind, so many of these games are contact sports. You're constantly hitting someone. You're sweating over people. There's that fear. Currently, right now, there's that fear of getting sick, and that's going to have a lasting effect on the game. I think for not only the short term, but a long term too. I mean, a year from now, or 6 months from now, this virus returns, we may have to go through this all over again. So it's fearing just to think about. It's a scary situation because so many of us, our livelihood depends on this game and sports, and it's crazy to think about. You never really thought about it until something like this happened, because years ago you think, oh, sports never goes away. Sports will always be here no matter what happens in this country, and so many of us have depended on sports in times of need, and now when something bad happens, it's, I think, adversely affected sports more than anything else. So it's a weird time. It's a weird situation to be in. But I just hope we come out of this, a better country, healthy. And I do think one day, whether it's this fall or next spring or even next fall, I think sports will return, college football will happen, and we will get back to living a normal life again.
Absolutely. We all hope and pray for that. So, final question for you, Aaron. You were just alluding to this, but I know all of us that cover sports are going to be glad when our new normal gets underway, whatever that is, because we'll have more to talk about. How tough has it been for you trying to come up with stories and content on a daily basis, Aaron?
Yeah, it's more difficult now. And I think you and I were talking before we went on the air, but typically right now, Michigan would be, in the middle of spring practice. I'd be writing, 3, 4, 5 things a day. We'd be interviewing players 2-3 times a week. We were spoken to Coach Harbaugh at this point. There have been stuff to write about. There have been a lot of stuff to write about. We'd be, kind of getting a better idea how this team is looking in the fall, and now we just don't have any of that. I did my, in the off season, I did my kind of position by position breakdown of these guys. With the NFL draft coming on later this month, we kind of hit that ad nauseum, I feel like, at this point. So it's definitely impacted things. I'm lucky if I can write one thing a day. I'm trying my best to come up with stuff that's still relevant to this year's team, while not being too serious, while still giving fans something to read or consume. Because, like I said, this virus has consumed all of us. Whether it's impacted you directly, or you've been watching the news and that's all you see. I do think sports are still an outlet to forget about all that stuff, and it's an opportunity for us to kind of sit back and care about something else. So it's certainly impacted my life. I'm not as busy as I would expect to be or have been in the past, but I'm fortunate that I'm healthy. I'm still employed at this point. So I got nothing to complain about.
Well, hopefully the next time we chat, it's going to be about the expectations of a football season that starts on time, September. But until then, Aaron, be safe. Keep up the great work on MLive, and we look forward to that next visit with you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks again to Aaron McMann from MLive for being our guest today. As you heard Aaron and I discussing, it is no simple matter to write a daily article or even produce a weekly podcast with all sports at a standstill. But we all keep chugging along, doing the best we can. For my part, we are still on our regular schedule of one show a week for the rest of April. From May through July, we go on our summer schedule of 2 shows a month, and we also throw in a Michigan Man Extra somewhere in that month. So business as usual, really, until football season starts. Knock on wood, it starts on time. So next week, I hope to have Steve Lorenz on to update recruiting. That's really what's going on right now. So if we don't have him next week, we will get him on sometime before the month is over. At any rate, we'll be back next week with a new show, so make sure you tell your friends and family to join us. A reminder that you can find our free show apps at the iTunes and Google Play stores. You can also hear us on Spotify, Spreaker, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at The Michigan Man. Wherever you get the show from, please comment or rate the program. It really does help us. That does it for this week. Again, my prayers are that you stay safe and at home the next couple of weeks. Let's hope by this time next month we are able to venture out and maybe our lives will return to some form of normalcy, step by step, day by day, if even in a small way. Until we meet again, have a safe and great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go Blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!